That in the last few moments, the first results have been released following an investigation of one of the biggest ever leaks of offshore secrets. 13 million documents, mostly from an offshore law firm called Appleby. Well, they are known as the Paradise Papers, and they reveal the tax affairs of rich and powerful people around the world. They've been obtained by the German newspaper Süddeutsche Zeitung and shared with the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, including here in the UK, The Guardian and the BBC's Panorama programme. Well, they show how the Duchy of Lancaster, which is the Queen's private estate, invested around £10 million offshore. Some of the money went into the off-licence chain Threshers, which later went bust, owing more than £17 million in tax. And a small amount went into Bright House, the hire purchase company that's been accused of charging inflated interest rates. Now, the leaked documents also reveal that this man, Wilbur Ross, Donald Trump's friend and Commerce Secretary, has business ties with Russian allies of President Putin, who are subject to US sanctions. And they suggest that Lord Ashcroft, the donor and former deputy chairman of Britain's Conservative Party, may have ignored rules around how his offshore investments were managed. Other papers suggest he retained his non-domicile status while in the House of Lords. That's despite reports that he had become a permanent tax resident in the UK. Now, it is important to say that tax avoidance is not illegal, but it is controversial, and these latest revelations are bound to fuel a political debate around offshore tax havens and whether government should do more to clamp down on them. Our first report is by Richard Bilton from the BBC's Panorama team, which has been investigating the Paradise Papers.
It is an island paradise, but there is a lot more to Bermuda than just beaches and sun. It is a tax haven, secrecy and 0% tax rates. One of the world's biggest offshore companies, Appleby, is based here. 7 million documents have been leaked. For months, we had to carry out secret research. So that's the head office. We have to be very careful at this stage of the investigation, because Appleby don't know that we have their data. But now we can report what goes on here. The leak is known as the Paradise Papers. It contains some of the biggest names in Britain, like the Queen's private estate. The Queen's investments are handled by the Duchy of Lancaster. Now, because of the files, we can see exactly where some of that money was going. £10 million was invested in tax havens, with $7.5 million in one fund in the Cayman Islands. It's perfectly legal, and there's no suggestion tax was being avoided. But should the monarch's cash be going offshore?
If the money has been invested in a tax haven, I would have thought it'd be extremely embarrassing for the Queen and the royal family. We expect higher standards of the Queen in terms of where their investments are located.
The Duchy told us all of our investments are fully audited and legitimate. The Paradise Papers also expose a new link between President Trump's government and the Russians.
You know who that is, right?
It's Wilbur Ross. He is President Trump's Commerce Secretary. Now this is Gennady Timchenko. He is the sanctioned friend of President Putin. We have found these two men have a business link.
Mr. Ross's experience turning around...
Wilbur Ross said he cut ties with companies that could compromise his new role in the US government.
Your service has resulted in your divesting yourself of literally hundreds of millions of dollars. You did it to avoid any conflicts of interest, correct?
That is correct, sir.
We don't think that is correct. We've discovered Mr. Ross has a stake in a shipping company called Navigator Holdings. One of its major clients is Siba, a Russian energy company. Gennady Timchenko is a shareholder who was sanctioned by the US government in 2014.
And you don't want to get known as somebody who plays footsie or walks right up to the line with sanctioned individuals. If you know anything about the Russians, it's that under the current system, It's easy to get dirty. Don't go there, man. Don't go there.
Mr. Ross told us none of the funds he managed ever owned a majority of Navigator shares, and he never met Gennady Timchenko. There are revelations closer to home.
I, Michael, Lord Ashcroft, do swear by Almighty God that I...
Lord Ashcroft was Tory deputy chairman and gave millions to the party. But what we found in the files could leave him facing a tax bill of tens of millions. A series of payments totaling around $200 million were made to him from a trust in Bermuda. To avoid tax on those payments, the trust, called Punta Gorda, must act independently. If Lord Ashcroft ignored the rules and was making decisions, he could face a big bill from the taxman. Emails seen by us suggest a rising sense of frustration amongst the trustees that Lord Ashcroft was not playing by the rules. To put it bluntly, we seem to be told nothing, whereas we carry the responsibility of acting as trustee. It looks like Lord Ashcroft was controlling the trust and expecting the trustees to rubber stamp his decisions.
Hi, I'm Richard Bilton. I work for Panorama, sir.
He didn't answer written questions, so I caught up with him at the Tory conference.
Did you have tens of millions in an offshore trust that you secretly control, sir? Did that mean that you could avoid millions in tax through that trust? Lord Ashcroft, why don't you just talk to me? It'd be great to hear your view. It was the Punta Gorda Trust, Lord Ashcroft. Sir, the Punta Gorda Trust. Dear, 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 is that your response?
His lawyers later said that I had started shouting something at him, by which time Lord Ashcroft had walked away and heard nothing of what I had said.
We could have been sponsored. We've done about a mile and a half.
Despite more than 2 minutes of questions, Lord Ashcroft wouldn't give us his side.
I'm not going to follow you in there, sir.
About the whole leak, Appleby told us it does not specialise in tax. These are confidential and commercially sensitive documents relating to Appleby and its clients. These are the first names from the Paradise Papers, but there are more to come from this extraordinary leak. Richard Bilton, BBC News.
And Richard joins me now live from Belfast. Richard, these revelations just breaking right now. How significant do you think they're going to turn out to be?
Well, this is an enormous leak. Panorama has been working on this for the best part of a year, poring over the documents, and there are an awful lot in there, and they reveal an awful lot about this world. The leak is from Appleby, which is a company based in tax havens, and they basically broker deals for rich individuals and for big companies. And in that offshore world, tax havens, people go there for simple reasons. They go there for low tax rates, for lax regulation, and for secrecy. Most people go there for those reasons, but that environment does create a reason to go there if perhaps you wanted to dodge tax, or worse. And through these documents, we get to see that world. We get to see the sort of deals that are being talked about and are being brokered.
And Richard, as you said, you've been working on this for a year or so. What's it been like carrying out this investigation that's taken you all around the world?
Yeah, it's been an enormous job, but it's a dramatic leak, I think. So if you think of other leaks that have been out there, probably the Panama Papers people are familiar with. Panorama, and I worked on that last spring, and that itself was pretty explosive and dramatic because it did pull back the curtain and showed what the offshore world was like. Why I think this is much bigger and much more dramatic, particularly in Britain, is Appleby work in UK tax havens. They've got 10 offices and they're linked to the UK. It's a sort of secret empire of offshore, if you like, a British empire of offshore. We can see the sorts of things that they're doing. And consequently, there are lots more British people and British companies in there. And we are talking about politicians, pop stars, sports stars, multinational companies. So these are big people, and more names will emerge in the coming days.
Richard, thank you very much indeed. Richard Bilton. And just to say, you can see Richard's programme, that Panorama special. It's here on the BBC news channel in the UK in just over an hour's time, and for viewers around the world, it's on BBC World News in just over an hour's time, that Panorama special investigation. Well, in the meantime, let's talk to our economics correspondent, Andy Verity, who's here with me in the studio. Let's pick up a little bit, first of all, on what those revelations show about Lord Ashcroft, who we just saw in Richard's report, the former deputy chairman of the Conservative Party in Britain.
Yes, and significantly as treasurer too, Ben. What they show, as Richard was explaining in his report, was that he had a trust into which he put hundreds of millions of pounds in the year 2000 in Bermuda. It was called the Punta Gorda Trust, and we also see in the documents that have been revealed that he was drawing down payments from it. Round about £150 million is documented. Now, the thing with the trust is that if you're a wealthy individual, you can put your money into it, and so long as you no longer have control over it, you don't have to declare it for tax. It's supposed to be for the benefit of someone else. But if you remain in control of the payments, then the trust structure doesn't really work. And the documents reveal that the trustees of the trust were very concerned about the payments that were going out without them knowing. So there's one quote here. A trustee says, "I would like to emphasise at this point, it's imperative at all times that the trustees are aware of any transactions and all transactions prior to them occurring." Clearly, that wasn't happening. Lord Ashcroft, we've had that put to him and he's declined to come back.
Tell us more about the revelations about the Queen's private money invested by the Duchy of Lancaster, which looks after her private estate, effectively.
Yeah, this is a fascinating story because we very rarely get any insight into the Queen's private investments. The Duchy of Lancaster is her private investment vehicle, if you like. It has hundreds of millions of pounds in it. Here we're talking about £10 million, so a relatively small fraction of that, but still a sizable amount of money, which went into two funds based in the Cayman Islands and Bermuda. And what may be a bit controversial is where some of that money, a small amount, went on from there into a retailer called Bright House. The reason that's controversial is because MPs have attacked it for charging inflated interest rates to some of the poorest people in the country.
All right, for the moment, Andy, thank you very much indeed. Andy Verity, our business correspondent. And Nick Witchell, our royal correspondent, is also here with me in the studio. Nick, any reaction to all of this from Buckingham Palace?
No, Buckingham Palace is really leaving this to the Duchy of Lancaster. And I think, Ben, unquestionably, this is embarrassing, it is surprising, and frankly, I think it's mystifying. How could her advisors, who placed this money on her behalf, possibly have thought that it was appropriate for her money to be placed offshore? Now, it's important again that we stress that there is no question of tax avoidance in her case. In point of fact, the Duchy of Lancaster is exempt from paying UK tax. It has a Crown exemption, but the Queen voluntarily pays tax, the equivalent of income tax, voluntarily on her private income. Now, that private income from the Duchy of Lancaster last year was £19 million, a significant income. But it is the association with this activity of tax avoidance, which is, I think, without any question, embarrassing to her. And it's the absence of common sense, really, and prudence displayed by her advisors in thinking that she, of all people, who is respected because she sets a good example, what can they have been thinking, placing her money offshore?
All right, Nick Witchell, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. Nick Witchell, our royal correspondent.